At 93, Michael Caine is one of the last living links to Hollywood's golden age. Over 7 decades and more than 100 films, he shared the screen with legends, learned from masters, and built friendships that outlasted careers. But for most of his life, he refused to rank the icons he worked with. Until now, when you read between the lines of his grief and look at who he turned to when the cameras stopped rolling, the truth comes out. Out of hundreds of legendary co-stars, only 5 people actually broke through the armor of Sir Michael Caine. Even now, at 93, Caine continues to make headlines. He recently announced he would narrate his own version of The Odyssey, not the Christopher Nolan film arriving in theaters this July, but a separate project launched through the AI company 11 Labs. His voice was officially licensed and reproduced for this cinematic multicast audiobook, which combines his iconic British tones with an immersive soundscape of original music and a full cast performance. In a statement, Caine called it a pleasure to be part of this retelling, adding that The Odyssey is one of the greatest stories ever told, and that he enjoys bridging classical storytelling with digital innovation. But this is just the latest chapter in a life full of memorable encounters. The story of those he loved most begins with one of his oldest and closest friends. Caine didn't hold back when Roger Moore died in 2017. He posted something raw, calling Moore one of my oldest and closest friends, and saying his world will never be the same again. That's not studio-approved PR language. That's a man who just lost someone who mattered. Here's the thing about their friendship. It wasn't built on a movie set. Caine and Moore never really co-starred together the way Caine did with others on this list. Their bond went back decades, off-camera, through the ordinary machinery of the British film and social scene of the 60s and 70s. 2 working-class London boys who ended up playing 2 very different kinds of leading men. Moore all suave and unbothered as Bond. Caine sharper, cockier, more dangerous. Different lanes, same era, same circles, and by every account, genuine warmth between them for years. And it wasn't a one-way thing either. Go back and look at how the entire Bond family reacted when Moore died, and Caine's tribute sits right alongside those from Sean Connery, Barbara Broccoli, Daniel Craig, and Pierce Brosnan. Except Caine's is the one that reads the least like a professional statement and the most like a gut punch. Everyone else was mourning a co-star or a colleague. Caine was mourning someone he'd known since long before either of them was famous. When someone says, "My world will never be the same again," that's not a line a publicist hands you. That's what's left when the small talk is gone. If Roger Moore was one of the people Caine leaned on the most, the one who actually taught him what he does for a living was Laurence Olivier. In 1972, Caine went toe-to-toe with arguably the most decorated stage and screen actor Britain had ever produced in a 2-hander called Sleuth. Just 2 actors, 1 house, 1 long, brutal game of psychological cat and mouse. No crew of characters to hide behind. Nowhere to coast. Caine has talked about how intimidating that was going in. This was Olivier. Knighted. Legendary. The kind of actor other actors get nervous around. But about a week into filming, Olivier said something to him that Caine has repeated for decades. Olivier told him that at the start, he thought he had a servant on set, and by that point, he realized he had a partner. Think about what that actually means. That's not a compliment. That's Laurence Olivier telling a working-class kid from South London that he'd earned equal footing. Both of them ended up nominated for the Oscar for that film. Neither one. Marlon Brando took it that year for The Godfather. But by every account, that didn't matter to Caine nearly as much as what Olivier had said to him privately. Caine later recalled Olivier's professionalism on set, noting a scene where Olivier cut his hand badly during a take but continued the scene without stopping, needing hospital stitches afterward. That's the kind of validation that sticks with a person for 50 years. If Olivier is the mentor figure, Sean Connery is the one Caine considers his actual equal. When Connery died in 2020 at 90, Caine didn't write some careful, distant statement. He called him a great star, a brilliant actor, and a wonderful friend. And then he added a line that only makes sense if you've seen their movie together. The man who would be king was the king. That's Caine in grief, still finding a way to make a joke that only the 2 of them would really get. Caine has said flatly more than once that The Man Who Would Be King is his own favorite film out of everything he's ever made. Not his biggest hit, not his most awarded, his favorite. He's also revealed that he and Connery actually met in the mid-1950s, long before they ever appeared on screen together. Connery was a chorus boy in a production of South Pacific, and Caine recalled him as being built like Arnold Schwarzenegger, a former bodybuilder who was Mr. Edinburgh. They became friends at a party when Caine was 22 and Connery was 24, and that bond lasted more than half a century. Caine even told the story of holding Connery's coat while the future Bond single-handedly beat up 4 men in a nightclub. But before either of them made it to Hollywood royalty, there was one accidental meeting with an American icon that changed how Caine carried himself. John Wayne. This one didn't start as a friendship at all. It started as a total accident in a hotel lobby. Caine has told this story on talk shows and in his memoir, Blowing the Bloody Doors Off. Sometime in the mid-60s, right after Zulu, The Ipcress File, and then Alfie made him famous almost back-to-back, Caine was staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel. One day a helicopter landed outside. Out walked John Wayne, full cowboy hat, the genuine article. Wayne clocked him from across the lobby, walked over, and asked his name. When Caine told him, Wayne said he'd seen him in Alfie, and told him flat out he was going to be a star, and then gave him 2 pieces of advice completely unprompted. The first, talk low, talk slow, and don't say too much. Caine has called it the most useful acting tip he ever got. The second piece of advice is completely ridiculous. Wayne looked down at Caine's shoes and told him to never wear suede. When Caine asked why, Wayne explained that once he was famous, he'd eventually be standing at a urinal. Someone would recognize him, and in their excitement, they'd turn to say something, and ruin his shoes in the process. Caine has said, laughing, that he took the advice seriously enough to give away every pair of suede shoes he owned. Here's a story that doesn't get told nearly enough, and it's the one that arguably changed the entire trajectory of Caine's career. Shirley MacLaine. In the mid-60s, MacLaine, already one of the most powerful women in Hollywood, had contractual approval over who got cast opposite her in her next film, a heist comedy called Gambit. The studio screened another film for her as an audition of sorts. She wasn't sold on the director, but she noticed one of the actors in that film, a guy in glasses named Michael Caine, and picked him on the spot to be her leading man, sight unseen, without so much as a script read. Caine has said outright that this is how he got into Hollywood, and he's credited MacLaine's kindness specifically, saying that after hearing all the stories about difficult, standoffish stars, here was one of the biggest names in the business going out of her way for a total unknown. While Gambit was still in production, Alfie was released back home and turned Caine into an overnight star in Britain. So by the time Gambit hit American theaters, he wasn't a total gamble anymore. He was already a name people recognized. But MacLaine had picked him before any of that happened, when there was nothing on paper to suggest it would work out. Caine and MacLaine went on to work together again decades later on the 2005 comedy Bewitched, and the warmth between them never faded. So there it is, 5 people across 7 decades who each shaped Michael Caine's career and his life in a completely different way. The friend he leaned on, the legend who called him an equal, the co-star he called the king, the cowboy who looked out for him for no reason, and the woman who bet on him before anyone else would. What's striking is how little overlap there actually is. This isn't 5 actors from the same clique doing each other favors. A United Stage legend, a Bond actor turned lifelong friend, a fellow working-class Brit who became his closest peer, an American Western icon who barely knew him, and a Hollywood powerhouse who took a chance on him before he'd proven anything. The common thread is that every single one of them either handed Caine an opportunity he hadn't earned yet or told him something honest he needed to hear. That's arguably a more telling definition of who someone loved most than any ranked list could ever be. At 93, with most of the names on this list already gone, Caine is one of the last people left alive who can actually tell these stories firsthand, which makes them worth paying attention to while he's still here to tell them. And even as he embraces new technologies like AI narration, his legacy remains rooted in those human connections that shaped him. If you want more of this, the real anecdotes, the verified stories, hit subscribe. And let me know down in the comments which one of these 5 surprised you the most. Was it the John Wayne shoe advice, the Olivier moment on the Sleuth set, or the fact that Shirley MacLaine basically handed him his American career before he'd done a thing to deserve it? Drop it below, and I'll see you in the next one.